Hello, I'm Admiral Jedi and want to thank you for joining my first historical playthrough of Paradox Interactive Games, starting with Victoria 3, a game I'm really enjoying. We are going to play this first historical playthrough as the nation of France. It's been 6 years since Charles X was tossed from the throne in favor of Louis-Philippe. So why France? First of all, there's a couple reasons, including not just personal preference, but also Paradox recently released the Voice of the People DLC, which has a lot of added French content, so we're going to dig through some of that. So what exactly is a historical playthrough? It's a challenge I'm placing on myself to play the game as closely to what actually took place in history as possible. This includes things like social events, geopolitical boundaries, and conflicts. Now, sometimes this might not be entirely possible. I might be limited by things like the current features of the game or random rolls and random events. But let's go ahead and get started. Before starting, let me get all of my disclaimers out of the way. First, this is not a Victoria 3 tutorial. There are plenty of great videos out there and people to follow that will get you what you're looking for if you are looking for how to play Victoria 3. Like any other Paradox game, you can play these games for hundreds and thousands of hours and still be a complete noob at these games, like I consider myself to be. Second, I am an American. My knowledge of French or European history is going to be pretty limited, and my pronunciation of French and European names and places is probably going to be even worse. I welcome your comments and corrections on this, if and as you come up with them. Third, really terrible things happen in history. Things like oppression, slavery, colonization, disenfranchisement of minorities and women. I do not endorse these things, but they will be a part of the historical playthrough because they were indeed part of history. So, if you're still here, and hopefully still watching this video, let's look at what's going on in France in the year 1836. Not Russia, France. This playthrough session is going to be focused around the reign of King Louis-Philippe d'Orléans, who came to the throne in 1830 following what was called the July Revolution, not the French Revolution, the first French Revolution that most of us know in 1789, but he was the cousin of King Charles X, and came to reign. We're going to follow King Louis's reign, and this playthrough session will last from January 1836 to the year 1848, when the Second French Revolution will occur and install a presidential republic, and we're going to try to simulate that in our playthrough as well as with the other events that have happened in the meantime. But we're going to be focused primarily around this concept of divided monarchists in the game, where three different houses, the House of Bourbon, the House of Orléans, and the House of Bonaparte, all attempt within the game to gain control of the throne. We're going to try and be as close to history as possible and make this entire first section playthrough about keeping King Louis on the throne for 12 years, from 1836 to 1848. Game-wise, we need to do a little bit of setup, and one of the first things we're going to set up, one of the very first things I'm going to do is break one of my rules for historical accuracy and set up the colonization of French West Africa. The reason why we're breaking the rules here is if we don't do this, the AI is going to swoop on in and colonize these areas immediately that France otherwise had colonies in, which I would be completely okay with if in history actual wars were fought between the great powers over these areas, because then I could just take it back as France. But that, to my knowledge, did not happen. And so French West Africa, we're going to get some colonies set up here pretty quickly. And the original French West Africa was 8 regions. Mauritania, Senegal, Sudan, and let's see what else we got here. Guinea, there's a colony that we can set up in Guinea. And the names are all different. Here we are. So Susu, Fuda, what is that? Fuda Jalan. So we're going to put a colony there. We're going to put a colony in Mauritania. Also, France had colonies as part of this region in Ivory Coast. And we have one already, I believe, in Upper Volta. Thought we saw that here in the States region. The names are a little bit different. There we go. In Mali, I think we already covered that. In Dahomey, and also in Niger. Now, France also had colonies that were referred to as French Equatorial Africa. Here's where we're going to play by the rules. The French West African colonies were not really set up until the 1850s, so we're not there yet. And like I said, I gave my reasons for why we're going to break those rules and do that now. Now, one of the things that we're going to use in the game, one of the game's mechanics, is African states have malaria. And so in order to be able to colonize them appropriately, you need to chase down this research chain of pharmaceuticals, which we're going to do, all the way down to quinine, which helped remove the effects of malaria. Well, that's what it does in the game, but it also helped out healing the effects of malaria. And once we get all the way down here to malaria prevention, which is going to take a while, then I'm going to, quote-unquote, allow myself to do the colonization efforts of French Equatorial Africa. So we're going to adhere to the rules there a little bit, because those things didn't really happen until like the 1850s, 1890s. So that's how we're going to play it, and let's look at some of the rest of the setup that we're going to need to do. In preparation for future events, we're going to open up a little bit of diplomacy. I'm going to start improving relations with Sardinia-Piedmont in preparation for the Treaty of Turin. And also, we're going to improve relations with the Ottomans because there was a war in Crimea that occurred that the French were a part of. So one of the other things we're going to do is look at what our interests are globally. We're going to declare an interest in the Niger region for African colonial reasons. We're going to declare in Indochina. There's a significant French involvement in the area that is known as Vietnam now. And I'd like to put an interest in Crimea, but I've run out of declared interest game-wise. So I'm going to take off my interest in this area called the Baltic, which is really Scandinavia, right? And declare it in this, I do not know how to pronounce that, Dnieper, where Crimea is, in hopes that if and when a war breaks out there that we are going to be involved. So that's really it as far as our setup goes, and we can get moving on with the actual game itself. There's 3 major areas that we're going to focus on in this playthrough. The first is going to be our conquests in North Africa. At this point in time in history, France had already begun an invasion of Algeria, the Algerian area. We have a journal entry for that, the conquest of Algeria, which is going to require us to own or subject Oran, Algiers, and Constantine. So we're going to start that right away. We're going to conquer them as opposed to puppeting them, because I made this mistake last time. If you puppet them and then try and zoom in here, Ait Abbas is landlocked and you can't get to them from either part. So I would have to conquer Constantine and then immediately violate their sovereignty, which is kind of lame. So we're going to start off with a conquer on that right away. Mobilize basically all of our big guns and get on over there to conquer that state. We'll take care of the rest of those later. The other efforts are going to be our West African colonies, which have already been started. And now we're going to dive in a little bit further on what's going to be the primary topic of this whole thing for the next 12 years of game time, and that is our good friend the king. So the year is now 1837. Let's get you caught up on a couple things. First of all, our conquest of Constantine worked. We are moving into Ait Abbas to try and make them into our puppet. And what else we got going on here? The House of Orleans continues to reign secure. They're at 77 progress over everybody else. Bonaparte could catch us after a while, but we're going to try and boost that a little bit more. But what we're going to do is try and stay extremely focused on keeping King Louis in power. And we're also going to start paying attention to this fine young gentleman here, Matthew de la Drome. He is our only radical leader so far, and we're going to rely on him to lead us into the springtime of the peoples, which is the event that's going to occur in 1848, which will lead to the Second French Revolution. So we're not going to pay a whole lot of attention to that right now, but basically, when this divided monarchist entry completes, Orleans will be in power, and then a second phase will show up, which is they want to cement themselves in power. And we do not want that to happen. So oddly enough, we are going to try and have this event complete and then fail, which it can do both. It can complete, meaning that Orleans is the house of choice, but this will stay up, and then we're going to need to meet all three of these conditions to start the 1848 revolution. That somebody wants presidential republic, which they already do. Turmoil in Ile-de-France is greater than 25. We're not really too close to that yet. But specifically that we also have an active Springtime of the People's journal entry, which we can get to. What is this here? Heirs of the Grand Army. Soldiers, Bonaparte's cause. Yeah, see, some of these things, you just can't get around them. So we can either give the Bonapartes 15 points or give them 5 points and increase armed forces. We're going to choose that. And so anyway, we're continuing on with our conquests. We are going to continue to keep King Louis in power and start paying a little bit of attention to our social groups, specifically the rural folk. They have a radical leader, but what we want to do is eventually radicalize them. We do not want to do it too soon, though. If the Springtime of the Peoples happens too soon, conditions can get ripe for an overthrow very quickly, and we don't want King Louis thrown out of power until 1848, just to be historically accurate. So we're going to continue on with conquest. We're going to continue keeping him in power and see how things go. Let's see if these folks are ready to become my puppet yet. They are. Consider thyself puppeted. So we have entered the year 1838, and something interesting happened here that I had no idea about. The Pastry War. So, this is just straight from Wikipedia. During the early years of the new Mexican Republic, there was widespread civil disorder. Commercial relationships between France and Mexico existed, and France rapidly became Mexico's third largest trading partner. However, France had yet to secure trade agreements similar to the United States and the United Kingdom. So something that happened, a French pastry chef had his shop looted, and he complained to French authorities, who demanded 60,000 pesos in reparations for the damage, even though his shop was only worth less than 1,000 pesos. It escalated up to a demand for payment of 600,000 pesos, and ultimately led to a blockade of the ports in Veracruz, which led to straight-out war. So we're going to do that, actually. We're going to go to war against Mexico for 600,000 pesos. Now, how do we do that? Originally, I thought what I would do... You can't just go to war with somebody in this game just straight for money. So originally, I was going to maybe take a treaty port, but because we historically don't have good trade relationships with them... let's go ahead and research our quinine. That has nothing to do with it. Anyway, what we're going to do is go to war with them, forcing them to open their market. This doesn't give us any infamy, which I was kind of surprised about, so that's kind of cool. But specifically, we're going to go do that, and we're also going to add a war goal of reparations, which is the closest we can get to money, and make these two things a dual primary war goal. Give us money in reward for our poor pastry chef, and there you go. So something that's kind of fun about this is that the naval blockade was led by Rear Admiral Charles, I think it's an American would say Baudin, but I suspect it's Baudin. I'm still probably mispronouncing it either way. You're welcome to correct me, like I said before. We've got this guy. Here he is. Here's the guy. Now, we run into a little bit of a struggle. I'd like to send a decent amount of troops over there. And so, but this guy's only got, he can only carry 20 ships right now. So let's see here. But it says we've got, what, 60 available? So if I give him a promotion, let's see what can happen here. Okay. So, gives him command of 80. I see. But we don't have 80 flotillas in the Occitania headquarters. Now, something that will happen is if I try and load this guy up with this whole army, it's going to massively affect how this works. So, I'm going to pull these 15 from the Rhine headquarters here. We're going to mobilize. But I'm going to see if I can activate some conscripts along with that to level him out here. 7, 8, 7, 8, there's 5. Is that in the Rhine? Let's see. What do we got? I don't know how to read this all that well. You know what, let's go ahead and activate one a little closer to home just in case. Okay. So we have Thomas Bugeaud. What do you got here, homie? Yeah, see, those other 8 that we activated were what we needed. Here come our conscripts online. This is all fine because the moment we go to war, we got to set up a naval invasion, and that takes like 5 weeks or something like that to pull off. So hopefully these conscripts get called up in time. We're going to find out. So once we go to war, nobody else is going to join, so 16 versus 17 conscripts should join us. We are going to launch our naval invasion to arms! And we're going to use the guy who actually did it to make a naval invasion of Veracruz using a guy who's not mobilized. Alright, this does not make me happy. Why can I not use my homie from the Rhine headquarters? See, I told you I have no idea how to play this game. Someone watching this video is probably screaming at me, because you can't da-da-da-da-da. I wish I could hear your telepathic voice in my head right now and tell me what I'm doing wrong. Alright, I think I might have figured it out with a little bit of help from my friends on the internet. I think it's because I mobilized this guy, that he's not selectable, that he'd be mobilized for a land battle, and it's gonna be really nasty to try and demobilize him. And also, someone had a little trick on there. If you recruit a second general to an existing headquarters, he can command a smaller amount. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this off by having Rear Admiral Baudin do a naval invasion against Veracruz using the new general, 29 units. And so that's going to begin. And we're going to see how that goes. It's going to take 7 weeks to pop up, so we're going to be losing points in that war for 7 weeks, but we'll see how it goes. Alright, naval invasion successful, and we caught them by surprise. They didn't know where we were going to land, so they're traveling to catch up. We're making a lot of ground here, covering a lot of ground. So just to be safe, we're going to bring over even more troops to help fight this battle here. Because, unfortunately, war fronts are a little buggy, not buggy, but they're a little wonky in Victoria 3 so far, where they kind of split and do all kinds of weirdness. So just to cover that, let's go ahead and bring over our buddy Thomas Bugeaud, who's sitting around doing absolutely nothing. And so we'll bring him over to the front as well. It's going to take some travel time, I assume. What you got for me? 2 months? Yeah, okay, that's fine. Airplanes weren't invented yet. So we're going to fight these battles and hopefully take revenge on our pastry chef and see if they give us the money. So we've been duking it out for a little while now. We're in 1839, and France has really done a number on Mexico here, where they're willing to capitulate to both war deals. So we're going to go ahead and propose that peace treaty. They're going to accept. Yay. And so let's take a look at our budget. How much did we get from that? Did we get 600,000 pesos from that? Where's the income? Mexico war reparations. There it is right there. 3.03K. So I don't know what that translates to pesos, but we got money. We got money coming in. We're going to fast forward a little bit to the year 1840 for a special event. And that event is the return of the ashes, which we have a decision for. Claim the body of Napoleon from St. Helena. So Napoleon died, and his remains... He was never cremated, so that's just sort of a misnomer. Return of the ashes means the return of his remains. That they were on the St. Helena Island, and they were returned in 1840 to be buried, to have him be buried on the banks of the Seine, as he wanted. I believe is in Paris. And so again, remember, I'm an American. I really suck at this stuff. So if I'm doing all of your history tremendous injustice, please forgive me and correct me. So we're going to take this decision. I regret this as a gamer, because what this is going to do is give us, the Bonapartists, some a bump. And remember, my goal is to keep the House of Orleans in power. The body of Napoleon Bonaparte has been returned from Great Britain, technically St. Helena, and transported, there it is, from St. Helena to French soil. The interment of the emperor's body presents an opportunity to rehabilitate the imperial past. So I'm going to choose this one, mostly because it doesn't give a huge bump to the Bonapartists. We're going to see a lot more of Bonaparte later, but for now, it is done. And they got caught up a little bit there, but so we're close. We're really close. And again, they're still proceeding further faster. So we're going to need to beat them out still and figure out how to do this, how to get that number up. So, in addition to what's been going on in 1840, we've been continuing our conquests in North Africa to finish up the conquest of Algeria. And we're going to, from here on out, focus again almost exclusively on the continuation of the House of Orleans and everything we need to do to set up the springtime of the people and the Second Republic. Alright, this is no good. An event came up that gave Bonaparte an even bigger lead, and now they're ahead. They're making more and they're ahead. So this switches. The House of Orleans is being challenged by Bonaparte, which we want to keep King Philippe in power. Now we're about to finish the conflict with mascara as opposed to the conflict with lip gloss. Heh. And I think there's an event here that might help us. So when we puppet them, what happens is the conquest of Algeria is completed because either France or its subjects owns it. And so we make the proclamation of Algiers. We have a few options here, and we get to choose an option that will pump one of the houses. So we're going to do this option here. The rule of the saber is at an end. Contact the sheikhs. We do get claims on other states and provinces, but I'm especially intrigued by this Orleanist 15. So the moment I hit that, we're going to now see again the House of Orleans reigns secure. So we exceeded them, and we're going to hope for the best, that no more events. It is tight at this point. That 15 point gave us a pretty decent lead, but let's hope for the best. One of the things we're going to need to really do is increase this gain and decrease their gain. So this 2.9 is primarily from how many military building levels we have. If I wanted to get really drastic, I could start tearing down military buildings. That's not cool. Instead, let's just keep pumping up the industrial side here and see if there's another character out there who we can sway to the side and use their popularity. But for now, I think that's pretty much it. We're going to fast forward to 1844 and see what goes on with Morocco. It's now 1844, and things have not gone well. The additional events that I was afraid of happening happened, and things cannot be any tighter between these two. 338 to 339, with only like 7 or 8 more months to go at this point. I did have to take some drastic steps and reduce the military by significant amounts, which kind of sucks, especially because we have to attack Morocco at this point. So around 1844, we're coming up on August, there was a leader of Algerian resistance that was suspected of taking refuge within Morocco, and France accused Morocco of sheltering him and basically went to war over it, which we're going to do. Those kind of mechanics, those political mechanics, don't really exist as a feature in the game. But we're going to go to war with them anyway and maybe just take out my aggression on how close these two houses got. So the real reason, or casus belli, if you will, as to why we're going to go to war, we're going to need to figure out what that is. We can do return a state because allegedly we have some claims on Morocco, but we're not going to really try to occupy Morocco right away. There is a protectorate that comes up later on, but that's many years down the road. So we're going to try to keep Orleans in power and go after Morocco here for a little bit. I'm going to do some battle with them, and we're going to come back and highlight this, because again, this is really the main feature of this playthrough, and so we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a few more months here. So war has indeed broken out with Morocco. We're underway, but we've got a lot more goodies to deal with at this point, which I'm happy about. We're going to make it here. I am going to let the time roll by, and in the end of this month, we're going to have our reward, which is, ta-da! The enduring House of Orleaniste. Opting for a more reserved and modern coronation compared to some of his predecessors, Louis-Philippe d'Orléans is crowned King of France in the Cathedral of Rheims. We have the choice, long live King Louis-Philippe. Okay, so either way, we're going to get this cement the House of the Rightful Claimant, or we're going to talk about that in a second. But basically, we can say petit bourgeois and industrialists are going to get more radical either way. But what we're going to do is give either landowners 2% approval or Louis-Philippe popularity. We're going to do the landowner 2 approval because we don't want him to be really popular at all. In fact, we are going to spend the next 3 years, yes, gearing up to kick him out of office with the second revolution, the springtime of the peoples. So that is our next and final agenda for this playthrough, is to reach these 3 goals. That somebody wants presidential republic, which they do, that turmoil in Ile-de-France exceeds 25%, and one of these, but what we're going to go for is the actual journal entry, springtime of the people, which we have as a potential journal entry. So the way to have this fire is, first of all, and when it does fire, it will add a ton of radicalism and revolutionary spirit all over the place. So basically, practically the moment it fires, then divided monarchists will fail and King Louis-Philippe will be removed. So it's a little bit odd that we wanted him to be there, only to then fail. We just want to be historically accurate, right? Keep him on the throne until 1848. But something else has happened, and that is we have a brand new agitator, and this is a famous guy, Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. So the nephew of Napoleon, and he will come into power and play a very significant role in future videos in 1852. So for now, we're going to let him sit around and agitate, and he is agitating for autocracy, which is probably going to happen. We're going to research that a little bit more, and then see if it's going to happen. But for now, we've got a choice to make. Chastened by his travels abroad and failed coup, is returned to French borders. Do we want to say he's not deserving of any special treatment and make his supporting groups more radical? That actually sounds good to me. We want radicalism at this point. Or do we want to have his interest group gain political strength and have him gain popularity? Let's, let's try that one. Okay. Got some words of the church here, which is kind of a leftover. I let this hang because this was for legitimists versus, you know, whatever. We'll go ahead and give them the points, but that doesn't really matter anymore because they're out. So what we want to avoid at this point is the House of Orleans cementing their rule. So all they have to do is stay in power for 120 months or 10 years, and this would pass. So we do not want this to pass. We want this to fail, but we want it to fail in grand scheme by having the springtime of the peoples succeed. So what we want to do in order to trigger springtime of the peoples, or prepare for it, because again, once we trigger it, it's going to happen fast, is we need a radical ideology that's either powerful or insurrectionary. The only radical ideology, did it say they have to be in government? I don't think so. It's got to be radical, and it's got to be radical and powerful or insurrectionary. Okay, so the only radicals that we have currently are where's he at? Is rural folk. So this is a problem because these guys can really never be powerful. They're primarily represented by peasants. I don't mean to sound so disdainful in my voice, but so much as it is primarily in interest groups clout, which is 8.2. It's got to get above 20 for them to be powerful, and that happens primarily from their wealth, and they don't have a whole lot. Peasants really do not have a whole lot of wealth, not to mention the fact that most peasants are not politically active. So the best way for us to accomplish Springtime of the Peoples is to have Matthew de la Drome not become powerful, but become pissed. So we need him to become insurrectionary, and the way we can do that, we already have a presidential republic, which is being stirred up by the intelligentsia here. It's got high support, but it has low radicalism. So the way we increase that radicalism is by making this interest group angry. Right now they're only unhappy. We can make them angry by passing laws that they don't agree with, and seeing as how we have landowners saying, hey, we want you to pass laissez-faire, which actually I want to pass laissez-faire as well. I think we can do that. I think we have support for that. Even just saying we're going to start exploring it will, I think, piss them off. So we see here that laissez-faire, the people opposed to it are industrialists. Don't ask me why. But this will radicalize the rural folk, which is what we want. The question is, do we want it right now? I do not want to have the Springtime of the Peoples occur right away. You know what? Why don't we cheat a little bit here? I'm not playing on Iron Man. Sorry, Tony Stark. Let's go ahead and laser. I don't even remember. You know what? Piss off rural. Let's go ahead and save it, because if even just doing laissez-faire, like beginning, not even passing the law, but considering the law, will have an effect upon them. Let's see what the effect is. So where is it? Laissez-faire. Okay, it's got a pretty high chance of success. Alright, so we did it. We started it. And that effect should happen pretty much right away. We're going to see a bunch of stuff happen down the bottom here. Industrialists get pissed. I don't know if landowners probably got happy. So let's take a look at what our interest group support looks like at this point. Yeah, landowners very happy. So that's good. They're going to add a little bit more to their investment pool contribution. Rural folk are angry. Fine. We kind of knew that was going to happen. Notice radicalism on the presidential support, or the presidential republic, went up, but we haven't popped into super high levels of radicalism. So this is exactly what I wanted to happen. Sorry for the save. I wasn't really willing to take the risk. So we're going to let this build up for a little bit and make them angry. And we're going to finish up the war here in Morocco. Historically, all that happened at the end of this first conflict was Morocco recognizing this as an official border and recognizing this as French territory. There's nothing in our war claims that we can do to say, recognize my claim. If they had a claim on this, there was an option for us to get them to revoke that claim, which I searched for and didn't do. So all we have here is we could potentially take Inner Morocco from them. I'm not going to do that. But the peace deal is basically just going to say, give me money. And so they're not ready to do that yet because I haven't pounded them. We haven't convinced them at gunpoint yet that that's a good idea, but we're working on that. So let's see how our budding revolution is going to turn out here. And let's hope that Springtime of the Peoples pops perfectly at 1848, and we will celebrate the conclusion and the finish of this video. Or not, or at least not quite. I had to back up a little bit, so let's go through that right now. So in order to get my interest group, which are my rural folk, to be insurrectionary, they need to be part of a movement that is trying to have a revolution, which makes sense. They need to be insurrectionary. In order to do that, I need to have a movement have its radicalism increased significantly. Each angry group that's part of a movement will increase its radicalism by 50. That is not enough for one single group. So previously, I was passing laissez-faire. That didn't actually work out. Instead, I have been trying to pass hereditary bureaucrats, which has put both intelligentsia and rural folk at almost angry. So we're going to keep the clock going on this thing a little bit, because I'm pretty sure it is, well, it's in the voting stage. There's a chance we could pass it. If we don't, I'm going to fast forward to it being passed. We're at mid-1846. Well, we are actually a year too early at this point. Let's go ahead and see if it passes. Okay, it passed. So, what we can do is sort of try to keep things in place for a little while and hope that it doesn't, so that these people don't get any happier. Because what I can do right now, I really want to stick to 1848. Technically, the Second Republic, the revolution began in like mid-1847 or something like that. Or rather, the political efforts began. The actual revolution, I guess, probably wasn't until early 1848, hence the name. But what we could do right now, and it's very tempting to do it and just end this video, but I may instead just fast forward again, is if we pass one more thing that upsets people, then we can do it. And what we could do is try to pass oligarchy. Nobody likes oligarchy. And so we can see here, this would radicalize the intelligentsia, this would radicalize the rural folk. That's exactly what I want. And both of them are by -10. So I think we're going to be able to just sort of chill for a little bit, fast forward, manage the economy. I don't want to manage the economy too well, actually, because then rising standards of living will cause people to become less upset. So I think we're just kind of cruise. I had to dismantle some military previously to make sure that the Bonaparte house didn't make it on the throne. And again, Orleans still on the throne for now. So I think maybe I'll just build some military, and let's try and fast forward to midway through next year and see what this looks like. All right, it is time. The year is 1847, October 26th. No significant date there, just me getting impatient with this. We've managed to keep people relatively grumpy. There is an ongoing war, which I forgot to prosecute to annex Mascara as a subject, but that's neither here nor there. But I am geeking out because it is time to pull the trigger on this. So what we are going to do is we are going to attempt to pass oligarchy. Where is it at? Maybe it's up here at the top. Yep. And doing this should radicalize enough people to lead to exactly what we want. Alright, intelligentsia and rural folk are both negative. Radicalism is critical, and it has happened. Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité. Revolution. This political movement is revolutionary. So, a couple things happened. First of all, the Springtime of the People's journal entry did occur, which is great. And we're going to be working on that afterwards. The very first thing we're going to be working on is getting divided monarchists out and putting in place the provisional government, or in other words, failing the desire that King Louis-Philippe has to cement his dynasty. We're going to stop that from happening by failing the divided monarchists. We have 2 out of 3 conditions met now. The only thing we're looking for is turmoil in Ile-de-France to be higher than 25%, which should be pretty easy to do, because this event, Rise of the Radicalism, lets us decide, do we want to stay conservative or do we want to support the radical movement? We want to support the radical movement, absolutely. And so we're going to do that. It apparently nominates Charles Fourier. Again, sorry for the mispronunciation. Part of the trade unions, which is a very, what's the term that they have? Marginalized group at this point, because they're not really allowed to vote. And this was, of course, a huge deal. It was the concept of universal suffrage and the right of all men at the time, later to be women, to vote. And so because they can't vote, the game mechanics have it so that they're marginalized. So they can be as angry as they want to be, but they have no clout to do anything. In my opinion, this is not terribly historically accurate. In order to change that, I would have had to kind of move hell and earth to get universal suffrage in place. That's very difficult to do at the beginning of the game. But, so we've got our radicalization at this point. What will happen, if I recall, is increasingly radical people will show up all throughout the state, and we have the option of saying, do we want it to happen in that state, or do we want it to happen in Ile-de-France? Which, of course, we do, because their radicalization in that area, notice oligarchy has 0% chance of succeeding. That was fairly non-historical to try and do that. I was just really dying to push this thing into revolution as quickly as we could. So what we need to look for is we need to continue watching this turmoil level and hope that it goes up to 25%. France cancels the... Well, I'm not so sure I want to do this, because if I do, I think it's going to kill the revolution. Ooh. Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité. Gotta keep this in place. Let's say okay, fine, and hopefully the revolution stays in place. Oh, wah, wah, wah. So the revolution is in place, which means our springtime of the people's entry is in place. Or did the revolution just go? Nope, it just crapped out. Well, that wasn't exactly where I was headed with that. Springtime of the peoples is still in place, so I think we can still work with that. We just, at this point, really need to pump up turmoil in Ile-de-France. We can do something a little drastic, which might have some historical precedent, in that if we basically just can people. Part of the reason behind the revolution, or at least the background for it, was due to standard, political, social issues, lack of goods and not enough wages and all that sort of thing. So one of the ways that the game handles turmoil is by the amount of radical populations. And right now we're at 21.5%. We need to get to 25%. This 21.5 is due to radical pops. So right now we have... It doesn't really tell you. I really wish they would tell you how many radical pops per area are there. I don't think there's a way to see that. If there is, it's buried and I don't know how to find it. But one of the quickest ways we can create radicalism is by decreasing standard of living. And so we can forcibly, thank God I don't have laissez-faire anymore, we can forcibly just can everybody from these buildings. So we're going to do that. Again, a little bit drastic because I'm going to have to rebuild them back all later. Let's get rid of university. Let's get rid of paper mill, furniture, motor, chemical. This stuff's going to tank my economy, which is going to suck. But, I guess that's somewhat realistic. Can't get rid of the Arts Academy. It's France, for crying out loud. And so let's see what happens there and keep an eye on our turmoil. 2197. Got to wait for the week to pass. I know. I go on speed 3 because I'm really weird. And nothing. Okay. What you got going for me here? We gotta have plenty of unemployed. We doubled the amount of unemployed people here. So, what you got? I know it's not gonna take that long. Or it shouldn't take that long. Maybe we're gonna have to kill the university or the art academy. Sorry. I know, blasphemy. 261k. Stirring radicalism. The radical oh, see, here it is. Yeah, dang it. This is exactly. The radical liberal currents in parts of France are causing. So it's like, it could happen anywhere, or you can say it can happen in Ile-de-France. So we just got a plus 20% bump in radical in the capital. That does it. There it is. Long live the Republic. Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité. It has happened right on February of 1848. What can I say? It is done. The provisional government is in place only for 4 more years, but mission accomplished. The crisis throughout France has proven too much for Louis-Philippe de Orléans. He is forced to abdicate and flee the country, and a provisional Republican government has been declared. Long live the Republic, even though it's only going to be for 4 years. And that concludes our video. Thank you so much for watching, and I had a great time. I'd really love to... I'm going to keep doing this series, actually. Please include any of your comments that you have. You can make fun of my pronunciation. You can suggest things that I do better, do historical corrections. I'd appreciate kindness, but it's not required. Anyway, thanks for watching. I had a great time.